Here we are in my Jayco Pinnacle fifth wheel, and today I'm going in depth on the JayCommand powered by BMPro. Now, before I purchased my fifth wheel, I had a lot of questions on this particular system, and really I kind of took a chance on it in the end, not knowing if I'd like it or regret it. And so my goal in today's video is to give as much information as possible on this BMPro system, which, by the way, it should apply to any Jayco product that has the BMPro system installed in it. So let's jump right in, and just to make sure we're all on the same page, let me just explain the obvious, and that is what the JayCommand powered by BMPro actually is. Now, this is my fifth RV, and every other RV I've owned before has had, an analog control panel kind of right here near the entry door, and it's got your light switches, your slide and on and controls, and then those infamous, horribly inaccurate tank and battery level gauges, right? You know what I'm talking about? Well, Jayco is starting to implement this BMPro system on more and more of its products, and I think they started doing it right around the 2021 model year. But basically, it takes the place of the analog control or command center with this Android-based tablet. And BMPro, by the way, as I understand it, they are an Australian-based company. I believe they started doing this more on camper vans, smaller units. And then they perfected it over the years, and so that's why Jayco has partnered with them to design this Android-based system. And that's precisely what it is, an Android tablet. So there's this screen here inside your coach, which is really just a remote in the end. And then there's what they call a node in your basement storage, and that's where all the wires actually connect and are switched on and off from. Now, in my unit, the Pinnacle 37 MDQS, the node is accessible here from the front basement storage compartment on the passenger side. And you just slide open this access panel right here, and there is the node. So it's kind of like a hub where all the wires come together to this single point. And the beauty of this is, if you ever had to service it, instead of having a mess of spaghetti behind an analog control panel in your wall cavity inside, here you've got all the wires laid out and they're clearly labeled. So I think it'd probably be a lot easier to service. And you'll notice there are inputs and outputs for just about everything on your coach. So starting on the left side here, these thicker gauge wires, most of these are going to be your slide controls for the slide motors and the awnings. It looks like it's provisioned for a maximum of 6 slides or 3 awnings, so that's kind of helpful to know. And then going along the top here, you can see I do have some open channels where there are no wires attached, and that's because some of these are more for really things you'd find on a toy hauler, like your fuel tank, your fuel pump, things like that. But you'll see everything from the water pump here, you got some gen inputs, and then moving along, you've got your tanks, so black tank, gray tank, your fresh tank, and then it kind of transitioned into some more HVAC controls right here for AC1, AC2, AC3. And then if we come on down to the bottom here, continuation of the AC controls, because remember, instead of having separate thermostats throughout your coach that are controlling your AC and your heat, now everything is running into here, and so your BMPro system controls all that. So you can see all the different AC controls, your fan motors there, the different zones, and then it transitions to some water heater controls, more gen controls, and then this last bank along the bottom here, these are going to be all your lights here. And so you can see all those labeled, your bed ceiling, living room 1, 2, dinette, and so forth all the way down. And then I've noticed here on the far right side where it says CAN, I don't know if you can read that in the video, it's almost like a CAN bus on your car where, it's like a central way of communicating different things together. And so this blue cord that's plugged into the CAN is actually for the leveling, the equalizer leveling system. But I really like how Jayco has put this in a location that's easy to get to, easy to service. I like how they've used different wires color-coded here for the different inputs and outputs. So if you ever had to trace it, it shouldn't be that hard. And here's a close-up of that outside temperature sensor that I mentioned, which is really handy to be able to know the temperature at your campsite. I will say that I've noticed this one seems to be sometimes a little bit off in terms of accuracy, which I believe is just because if you're heating up your coach real warm, that heat's going to transfer to this wall and probably influence what this temperature sensor is reading in. But it's still a really handy feature. Then back inside the coach, in addition to the tablet, the display up here, you also have these physical buttons down here. And my understanding is these buttons are actually completely separate from the tablet above, so that if the tablet were to ever go out or quit working, you still have all these buttons down here and this analog LCD display that work independently. And then you've also got these remote keypads or wireless light switches that are strategically located throughout the coach. So this one here is next to my theater seating, and then I've also got another one here just next to the stove. And then there's 2 more in my bedroom, one right when you walk in the doorway, and then a second at your bedside. So a total of 4 of these remotes in my floor plan. And you can see that each one has custom buttons on it that are appropriate for the location of the switch. And last, there are other wireless sensors throughout the coach that communicate via Bluetooth to the node, such as this temperature sensor here in the refrigerator, to tire pressure sensors outside on the tires, and even propane tank level sensors. Now, one other thing I'll throw out there regarding the sensors is I believe Jayco and BMPro are working on adding a microphone to coaches, I think in the 2022 model year and ahead. And that will allow you to control things on the BMPro app with your voice. You know, if you think about it, it's Android based, so think about all the things you can control with Google Assistant, right? And so it's essentially, I think, just a matter of connecting through software the BMPro app to recognize those voice commands, and then you can control things in your coach. So that's pretty neat. So I don't have that on my RV here. It's a 2021, but that is something that will be coming, I believe, to the 2022s. Well, that's a broad overview of what comprises the system and how it's laid out, but let's walk through the actual interface itself. And we'll start with these buttons down below. And you probably heard this before, but these are dedicated buttons that you can use independent of the tablet screen there. And I really like this a lot. So up top, you've got your light controls. Number 1 turns off all your interior lights. Number 2 is going to be your outside lights on and off. And then number 3 is going to be your inside and outside. Basically 1 and 2 put together. It's going to turn all those on and off. Then you've got WP for your water pump. You can easily turn that one on and off. And then I really like this setup over here. So you've got an extend button, a retract button, and then this LCD display, and it has abbreviations. S is for slide. So you've got slide 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then if I go back, you'll also see there's an A for awning. And so if I want to retract or extend any of my slides or awnings, I can do it with just these 4 buttons right here. You just select which one you want to operate and then use the extend and retract buttons there. So I really think this is super clever. You know, a lot of the smart command systems that I've seen on the market either have a display that's all touch and no buttons below, or they've got all buttons. So I like that this one has both of them. And for me personally, when I'm extending my slides in and out, typically most of the time I'm going to be using these buttons here. I just find it much easier to press a button that you physically press, and it has kind of a click action to it when I press these different extend and retract buttons. So personally, I really like this a lot. But let's dig into the screen itself and go through all the pages. So first up is this home screen layout here, where it kind of has a summary of what's going on in the coach, starting with your climate here, and then you've got your lights real quick. And again, this is just a shortcut to this same number 1 button that's down below. Then you've got shortcut to your motors, energy, and your tanks there. It'll show you an exclamation point because in my case, my freshwater tank is empty. And then in the top right, you've got these little icons here, a cloud icon symbolizing that it is connected to the cloud through Wi-Fi, and then a Bluetooth icon symbolizing that it is connected to the node through Bluetooth. Then you've got a settings sprocket. We'll go through that a little bit later. And then notice up here, you've actually got this is your outside temperature. That's that sensor that I showed you outside. So that's pretty handy. All right, so I'll take you through all the pages one at a time. The navigation's very simple. Along the left here, you have these different icons representing different pages. We'll tap on that first one, the water droplet, and here you can see everything related to water and liquid. So you've got your water pump. You just tap it to turn it on and off. There's no feedback or anything, by the way, when you tap these buttons. It's just changing color on the screen itself. There's not like a haptic feedback or a vibration or anything like that. But you've got your electric and gas water heater there, and then you do have your tank levels here. And like I mentioned before, you get an exclamation when it is empty or when these tanks are full. So it kind of draws your attention. Now, one thing that really surprised me on these tank levels is I just expected with a digital readout here that you'd have more accuracy in the increments and the levels as the tanks get full or go empty. And it really surprised me because anyone who's owned an RV before, you know that the analog levels for your tank and your battery are just notoriously inaccurate. And you only have, 1/3, 2/3, and then full or empty. And I was really surprised because the same exact sensors are powering these readouts. In other words, yes, they're all empty right now, but as they start to fill up, they're going to jump from empty to 1/3, 2/3, and then full, just like the analog readouts. And so that was one major disappointment here on the tank display page. So I'll talk about that more when I cover likes and dislikes, but everything on this page is related to your tanks and your water. Then we'll hop over to the next button, the motors button, and it defaults to this leveling screen here. And this is really an extension of the remote, the control panel that is in your wet bay from Equalizer Systems. And so you've got pretty much the same exact buttons redundant here on your screen. You've got your left to raise the left side of your coach, the right, rear, front, and so forth. You can retract all. You can auto level from here or cancel. I also like that they give you a status here so you can see if there is an operation like an auto level in progress. You can see all that from your screen. And then you're going to scroll down to get to the slide motor. So just like a phone, you're just going to scroll up here, kind of swipe up, and you can see then you've got your slides in this column and your awnings over here. So you've got slide 1 and 2, a simple retract and extend button. You'll push that and hold down to retract or extend. And again, you just scroll to get through all the 4 different slides and your 2 awnings there. So I'm really impressed that they were able to integrate, here with Equalizer Systems. That's a third party, completely separate, right? Completely separate, set of controls. And yet they were able to communicate through the CAN bus system with Equalizer Systems control panel. I really think that's slick to be able to do that. And I really like that you can control these things here on the screen because, and we'll talk about this more when I demonstrate the phone connection, but basically everything you see here in the app you can control on your phone as well. And so it's super handy with the slides. If you're at a campsite where there's an obstacle, maybe a power pedestal or something, and you're not sure if you've got clearance with your slides, well, you can just pull all this up on your phone, be outside looking at the situation, looking at the power pedestal on your slide and controlling that slide going in and out. Same thing with awnings and trees. So really like that a lot. And then even with the leveling system here, sometimes I'm in my truck and I need to go up just a little when I'm hitching up, right, with a kingpin. And so I can, just from my phone, tap and hold that front up and raise or lower the nose of the fifth wheel. So I really like how they seamlessly integrated that with all the different systems. Then we'll hop over to the next page, which is this thermometer, the climate control, the HVAC screen. And again, you just scroll through to get to your different zones here. So we'll start at the top one. You can see it's very well laid out. It's color coded. When the heat's on, it's red. Very easy to understand. You can change the temperature going up and down. So this is basically like your thermostat then. You can turn it on and off just by tapping it here, just like a power button. And then over off to the right, very easy to use if you want to change the mode from heat to cool auto, or fan. Pretty self-explanatory. And then on the heat, if you do have a heat pump and a furnace, then it's going to let you choose between which fuel source, or you can do both. So very easy to use. And of course, you've got your fan speed there as well. Then you've got your second and third zones, and they're going to operate the same way. In my case, they're just ACs. There's not a heat pump on those units, and so you'll just power them on, and then you can choose your different cool mode there, cool auto, fan, and you can also choose your fan speed low or high there. So pretty basic and self-explanatory, but I like the way they laid everything out with the colors. Makes it really easy to use. And then the temperature sensors that it's reading in here to know when to call for heat or cool, they're actually located in your living spaces. So for instance, my second AC is actually in the bedroom in the front. And so there's a temperature sensor in the bedroom that's reading in for that thermostat. And I really like that, as opposed to it just being randomly located in your coach, because then it's not really accurate to that zone. So that's really helpful. And then my third AC is kind of in the kitchen area, and so the temperature sensors for the third and the first are kind of right here in the entryway. All right, so that is the climate control page. Next, we'll hop on over to the light ball, which is obviously going to be your lights in the coach. And so here you can see labeled all the different lights. And again, you just kind of scroll through those pages, and you can turn on and off the lights just by tapping on that light bulb there. And you can see we're in the hallway right now, so I'll turn that on and off. And I also really think it's clever that they let you dim most of the lights here. Some of them are not dimmable, but almost all of them are. So that's a pretty neat feature there. And they're all labeled, very easy to use. And again, these correspond to those same remote keypads that I showed you earlier. Some of these same lights are going to be featured on those different keypads, but very intuitive, again, very easy to use. Now, while we're on this page, I will mention there are a bunch of lights that are missing from this screen. In fact, throughout my coach, in addition to those little wireless remotes, those little keypads that I showed you, I have probably about a dozen or so kind of traditional, conventional rocker switches that are going to control other lights that are not featured here in the BMPro system. And so there's really only 12 lights that you can control. And my assumption is that the BMPro system only supports so many lights, controlling so many lights. And so Jayco had to choose, 12 of the main, more popular lights that you're going to be using. And then the rest of the lights in the coach are going to be operated kind of old school with those rocker switches. So that's just something to keep in mind. Not all the lights are going to be featured here on the BMPro, just the ones that Jayco wired in. And if I had to estimate, I'd say probably a half to 2/3 of the lights in the coach are on the BMPro system, and then the other third to half the lights are going to be manually controlled. But let's hop over to this next page here. This one's kind of has a wireless icon. If we tap on that, this is going to be all your sensors. So we'll start here. You've got tire pressure sensors. And I really like that Jayco actually gives you 4 tire pressure sensors to start out. I think a lot of brands would just have this functionality and make you pay extra for the sensors. And it's basically just those screw-on caps that you're probably used to from aftermarket brands. But here it's actually integrated into the system. Now you're noticing that one of them is not showing up, and I believe they're kind of triggered by motion to a certain degree, and so they kind of go to sleep after a while to save on battery power. At least that's what it seems to be in my experience. But it's really nice. You've got your pressure and of course your temperature on each one of those 4 sensors, and they're very clearly labeled. Then over here you've got your temperature sensors, and again this is all through Bluetooth communicating to the nodes. So the refrigerator one, I showed you that earlier, and then I've added 2 to various places here. So I've added one to one of the rooms, the mid-bunk room, and then another one in the underbelly so that I can monitor when it gets cold outside, what the temperature's like there to keep things from freezing. So Jayco gives you the first one, the refrigerator temperature sensor. It's all set up when you buy the coach, and then you can just add these, extra ones. I think they're sold in pairs, and that's probably why I bought 2 of them. But scrolling down here, you've got then propane sensors. This is really slick. I think that they integrated this in here. However, they do not give you these propane sensors with the coach, at least when I bought mine. I had to pay for these separately. And one thing that's really interesting on this, so you'll notice that it's showing me 1/4, all right? Now the sensors themselves, they look visually very, very similar to the Mopica or AP Products brand. And on a previous RV I had, I added propane sensors to the rig and bought them and put the sensors in and everything. And so these look almost identical with the exception of the color for the BMPro sensor. So I'm thinking that they probably license the technology that AP Products Mopica has on their propane sensors, and they probably license it to BMPro and then program it to work with the BMPro system. But one thing that really surprised me on these propane sensors is I remember on the AP Products, the Mopica brand propane sensors, it would give me a full readout in 1% increments on my propane tanks. And so if I had 1% full, it would tell me 1% on the screen. If I had 92% full, it would tell me 92%. I was very disappointed to find here they step down the accuracy, the increments, and it's really just 1/8 levels rather. And so you'll see 1/8, 1/4, half full, 3/4, 5/8, that sort of thing, instead of an exact percentage. So I really would have preferred that, but it is still nice to be able to see the propane levels. And as a bonus, they are compatible with the giant 40-pound propane tanks that Jayco gives you here on the North Point and Pinnacle models. And then last page is going to be this lightning bolt, which is going to be your energy, kind of your battery and fuel screen. So on my unit, I've got an Onan 55 LP generator, and so this is where I'm going to control my generator from. So instead of having a separate generator control screen above, with hard buttons and everything, it's all integrated into here. So I do not have that separate Onan control panel in my coach here. But it makes it really easy. You can start and stop the generator. If you want to get into some of the auto gen start things where it controls your generator based on temperature or battery voltage, you can get all that set up as well. And then down here, you're going to see battery and fuel. So if you had a toy hauler, I would imagine you'd see your fuel gauges right there. And then for your battery, it's just going to show you your voltage. So notice there that that's all they're showing you on the battery is your voltage. I was kind of expecting to see a little bit more. I'm a big fan of the Victron BMV712 battery monitor and just all the data that it gives you. And I think this was a major miss right here, and I'll talk about that more in the likes and dislikes, but I think BMPro could have put a lot more data on your battery here on this screen. All right, so that's it for the pages here on the left side. I'll go back to the home screen and show you a few more things. If you click on up here, this little sprocket, It's going to take you into your settings, your Bluetooth, your remote connection if you want to set that up where you connect to Wi-Fi. You can also set up your WineGuard system. I didn't actually do that, and one tip is if you want to set up your WineGuard to be controlled here, you need to do it before you change your SSID, the name of your network, because once you change that, it's not going to let you go in here, to my knowledge, and put a custom SSID in there. So just a little tip there. You can see under here you got sensor settings. You can show or hide them. You can set what the threshold is to warn you on the pressure and the temperature. And then same thing on the different temperature sensors. You can set thresholds for that, like your refrigerator. When it gets below freezing, maybe you want to be alerted, or above 42 for food safety, things like that as well. So pretty slick the way they designed that. Then you've got your propane section right there. And you're just going to use these back buttons here on the bottom to navigate back through there. Then you've got your battery levels here. So it's going to show you the remotes that I showed you, the 4 that are scattered throughout the coach, what the battery levels are, because eventually you're gonna have to replace those, obviously. I think they're just watch batteries. And same thing on the tire pressure sensors as well, and the temperature and propane sensors there. All right, then under the energy center settings, this is gonna be where you can use the auto gen start to support these different parameters. So if you have a generator, this is really slick, because maybe you leave your pet in your RV and the power goes out at your campsite and the temperature starts climbing, it's really hot outside. Well, you can set this where if the temperature in your coach gets to a certain level, then it's going to kick on the generator to cool down your pet and keep them alive. So really handy to have that feature set in there. It also has quiet time hours that you can set. I mean, they really did a lot of nice parameters that you can control there. And then down below, you've got user manual, about, privacy, preferences. We'll hit on that. You can see you can change between Fahrenheit, Celsius, PSI, all that good stuff there. And then it does have a diagnostics page there. I have not used that, but it basically has just a bunch of different parameters corresponding to the different inputs and such on the node. And I imagine that would be helpful if you ever ran into trouble. Maybe there was a short or something on the wires there. I'll talk briefly about this remote connection here. This is really something that I think sets the BMPro system apart, and that is they actually give you the ability to connect the node to Wi-Fi here. And so the significance of that is not only can you connect and control the device when you're connected to Bluetooth on your phone, but if you connect here the node to Wi-Fi, then you can pretty much control your coach anywhere in the world as long as your coach is connected to Wi-Fi. And that's pretty slick, because that's something where BMPro is basically providing that as a free service. They're having to provide the DNS forwarding, the port forwarding, all that stuff. So no matter where you are in the world, when you pull up your phone and then open and try to connect through the cloud, it knows where to find your coach through the internet and then seamlessly connect it so you can control it. And that's a free service. They don't charge you anything for that. I could see where some brands may try to make a little extra money and make you subscribe on a monthly or yearly basis to control that through the cloud. And so I really got to applaud BMPro and Jayco for making that a free, built-in service with the BMPro system. Now, let me talk about one other thing. I mentioned earlier that this is an Android-based system. And so if you have an Android phone, you're probably already recognizing, familiar elements, like when you pull down and swipe and you see your little icons up here, your different settings there, or down along the bottom, you have your back and home screen or your different apps. So when you start tapping all these, it's going to look basically like an Android tablet, right? And so you've got apps on this tablet. I mean, literally, you could pull up a web browser and go to a website on it, or check your email if you want it all right here on this tablet. But let's talk about some of the implications of this being an Android-based tablet, where really all it's doing is running an app that is from the App Store, just like you would have on your phone. So on the Pro side, you basically have this same exact interface on your phone. When you download the BMPro app on your phone, you're going to get this exact same interface. Everything's going to be laid out exactly the same, so it's going to look super familiar. So, I mean, that's definitely a pro. But I think on the con side, this app is running on top of an Android operating system, right? And it's not the only app that's running. And so I remember before purchasing it, I did read some reviews here and there where people complained that it was buggy, it was glitchy, it might, crash or freeze on them. And I think really part of the problem is because it's an Android-based system and it's running on Android, there's other things going on the tablet other than the BMPro app. And so you just have to wrap your mind around that concept and then think through, okay, well, what can I do to set this Android tablet up for success so that there aren't so many things running in the background that could then prevent or make the BMPro app crash or malfunction. And let me give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So if you have an Android phone, when you set it up, it's going to ask you to set up your Google account, log in there, and it's going to synchronize everything from your calendar to your Google files to your Gmail, everything Google related, right? And so the same thing is going to be true here on this tablet. You're going to want to set up a Google ID on it. You can choose to use your personal Google ID, or you can make a dedicated Google ID just for your RV. It just kind of depends on your preference. But either way, you want to think about what is Google all syncing to this tablet that is unnecessary. So in my case, I took a lot of the apps that Android comes with standard and disable them. So you can just go into your settings here and then scroll down to your apps, or scroll up rather to your apps. And you can actually go in here and disable some of the apps that you're not going to be using on this particular device. So for instance, maybe you're not going to be calling people here from your tablet, so you can disable it. So I've disabled it. You can see enable is listed there. If you want to re-enable it, that's fine. But you just want to go through all the different apps here and figure out, okay, which ones am I never going to be using? You can see along the right here which ones that I've already disabled. And my thinking was, in doing that, all these apps that run in the background that are doing things without you knowing, those could just contribute to the JayCommand app malfunctioning, because there's other things tasking the processor that this tablet's running on that could interfere with the JayCommand app or cause it to crash. Think about your own phone. If you have an Android phone or even an Apple phone, how many times in a month does your phone crash while you're using an app, right? Maybe once a month, twice a month. I mean, it just kind of depends on what kind of apps you're using. But the same is going to be true here. This is just like another phone, a tablet running Android. And so you just want to think through what apps can you disable. As I'm looking at these, I probably could disable some more of these apps, but I know I'm not going to be pulling up Acrobat files here on this little tablet. That's something I'm going to do more on my phone. So go through and disable those apps. I think that's a big thing that'll help. But then also, when you set up your Google account, maybe you don't want to synchronize your email. Maybe you don't want to synchronize your calendar, your appointments, and all that other stuff. Maybe you do. It's just up to you, but I would minimize the number of things that are syncing to this tablet so that there's fewer things running in the background, fewer updates and things that it's checking over time. And that way, this is more dedicated just to the BMPro app. Next up, let me show you what the app looks like on your phone. So I've got my Android phone here. This is a Pixel 5 for those curious, but notice how the BMPro app looks pretty much identical here on my phone. That's because it's Android based. It's the same app that's running here on the tablet behind me. It's just running on my phone. It's in portrait mode, but notice how familiar it looks. You've got the same icons going down, the menu option there, the same exact screens. You scroll through it literally just like you do on the tablet. And so I think this is one huge pro with the BMPro system, is that everything looks very familiar. The app here is not an afterthought or an add-on or something that's kind of a weakness of the whole system. This literally is just as robust as the control panel over here. Now, right now I'm connected through Bluetooth, and you can see here up in the upper corner at the right corner of my screen, I've got that little Bluetooth icon. So that's telling me that I'm connected to Bluetooth to the actual node. And that's important to know, as that has a range, I would say probably about maybe 20 to 30 feet outside your coach before that Bluetooth connection is going to fall off. So I've used it to, retract and open slides, no problem at all the way around the coach. I've used it in my truck to raise and lower the leveling system. I've also used it while we're on the road. You can actually connect to the system and check your climate, check your tanks. Maybe you forgot to turn off your water pump and you're wondering, did I turn it off or not? Well, you can go right in here, connect through Bluetooth, and I've had no issues being in my truck. I'm probably about a good 20 to 25 feet away from the front nose there, and you can see you've got access to all those same features. So really like that Bluetooth functionality. But then, like I mentioned before, I think it's a game changer that they also let you connect via the cloud. So like you see here on the tablet, this node is connected to the cloud, and so if I was not in Bluetooth range, then this Bluetooth icon is going to change with a little cloud symbol, just like you see here on the tablet. So the benefits of that are, like I explained before, I can be in my house. I store this on my property, but I'm out of Bluetooth range, so I can't control the unit from Bluetooth, but I can be in my house connected to Wi-Fi on my phone, and then the coach, of course, is connected to Wi-Fi here at my barn. And so then I can control everything on the app here just like I could do if I was connected to Bluetooth. They do block out some of the functions, like I think the water pump and some of the motors, just for safety reasons. But it's still pretty slick that you can control everything from the cloud like that. And if you're interested, I'll just demonstrate one practical use case with that cloud connectivity. So let's say that it's getting cold outside, it's going to drop below freezing, and you want to be able to monitor the temperature in your coach and make sure nothing freezes. Like I don't winterize my coach in the winter because we use it a lot, and in here in Georgia, it doesn't get below freezing a lot for long periods of times. But from my house remotely, I'm probably several hundred feet away from the RV, I can connect through the cloud, and I can go here to sensors, and I can look at the enclosed underbelly and see what the temperature is. And then if I want, I can go over here to the climate, and I can turn the heat on and make sure that it's warm enough to keep that underbelly heated up. So that's really slick the way they integrated all this into the app, and that you can do it remotely. I can even check my propane tanks, and so if I'm using the furnace to heat the coach, I can see where my propane tank levels are, if I'm going to run out or not. So really handy. There's just a lot of practical use cases that you can do with that cloud connectivity. All right, so that's pretty much a full overview of the BMPro system, but now let me talk about likes and dislikes. And I'm going to kind of intertwine some of these and go back and forth on the likes and dislikes. So first up, I really like that Jayco and BMPro made this a one-stop shop. Previously in your RV, you're going to have separate controls for your generator, for your air conditioner, for your heating, then for your lights, for tanks, for your slide controls. And here, everything is in one screen, one control panel. It is a one-stop shop, even with the different third parties and vendors involved with those equipment, like the leveling jacks, for instance. So I really think it's impressive that Jayco got all that wrapped up in this nice, neat package. However, I will say at the same time, there are a few things missing from this BMPro system, such as the inverter controls. If you have a residential refrigerator in your rig and an inverter, the inverter still has its own separate control panel. Same thing goes for the solar charge controller. Just above this display, I've got my Go Power solar charge controller. That's a separate display. And then, like I mentioned before, there's some lights in the coach, probably about a third to a half of them that are not in this BMPro system. And so yes, Jayco and BMPro put just about everything they could. They packed it in here, but they did leave a few things out, and perhaps it's just with the RV industry, different vendors that maybe don't have a means for them to communicate with BMPro yet. And so maybe as time goes on, some of that technology will develop, and more third parties will be able to be read in and communicate here in the BMPro system. But as far as the lights go, I think BMPro probably needs to add some kind of like an add-on module or something that extends and expands the capabilities to let you add in, all of the lights. I think if, right now there's 12 channels for lights. I think if they doubled that and made it 24, that probably would cover most RVs. Second like I want to talk about, and this is one that I really just want to praise Jayco and BMPro again and again, and that is on the overall UI, the user interface, the visual design and representation, everything from the icons to the colors. I've looked at a lot of other systems, even on high-end Class A units, and the interfaces a lot of times are just very flat, dated looking, monochrome, very simplistic, and yeah, they're easy to use, but they look just very blah and kind of dated, almost like from the 90s or 2000s. And so I think they did the right balance here on the BMPro system of integrating colors and gradients and icons and not making it too flashy. It just looks tasteful. It looks clean, especially when you start hopping through the different pages. Someone spent a lot of time here designing all the different icons and buttons, laying everything out in the right place to make it easy to get to. Nothing on this app looks like an afterthought. It looks like they really carefully crafted everything and laid all the buttons out and got it right. So I just really want to praise Jayco and BMPro again and again on the UI. I think it looks fantastic. Third like is going to be on this cloud-based connectivity here. And I really think BMPro, the fact that they offer this option free, that you can connect here your node to Wi-Fi and then be able to access your coach anywhere in the world that you've got internet connectivity, I think that is absolutely wonderful, and that they don't charge you for anything. So I really like that feature a lot. And one thing I'll just touch on there when I was looking to buy my fifth wheel and read a lot of the reviews on the BMPro app, some people complained about the connectivity and it failing and intermittently connecting. And I think a lot of it has to do with understanding on your phone when you connect to the BMPro app, whether you're connected through Bluetooth or the cloud. And so when you open the BMPro app, there's going to be a slight delay. You can see everything's grayed out as it figures out whether it's connecting via the cloud or Bluetooth. And sometimes it hesitates a little bit. You can see there it first connected to the cloud on my phone, even though I'm within range for Bluetooth. And then it figured it out and said, hey, wait a second, I'm closer and in range with Bluetooth, so let me connect to the Bluetooth. So you just got to look up there on the top of your phone and see whether it's connecting through Bluetooth or the cloud. And then you'll also notice everything kind of gets grayed out as it's trying to figure that out. Now, on that note, I think it probably would be helpful if there was some kind of progress indicator or something showing you other than just graying out your screen here, whether you're in the process of connecting, whether it's struggling to connect through Bluetooth, struggling to connect through the cloud connection and so forth, just something to indicate that a little bit more. For me personally, usually it takes 3 to 4 seconds when I open the app for the first time in a while for it to connect, whether it's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. But once it connects, for me, it's been flawless. It stays connected. As long as I'm within range on the Bluetooth, it stays connected. If I hop out of range and I'm at home here, then I've got Wi-Fi and it seamlessly transfers over to Wi-Fi. So just keep an eye on what's going on there in that upper right corner. All right, now one major dislike here on the BMPro, the JayCommand system, is going to be on your tank levels. So as I mentioned before, these are the same old tank levels that you're going to have on any analog display where you only get in 1/3 increments. And I think that's horribly inaccurate. It's kind of like just the RV industry's been stuck on those sensors for the last few decades. And I really think integrating a display like this would have been a perfect opportunity to partner with another vendor, maybe like Sea Level, who has those sensors that offer the 1% increments all the way up. So I was really disappointed that these only show 1/3, 2/3 full and empty. I really think Jayco needs to rethink that. Maybe it's a limitation of BMPro, I'm not really sure. Maybe it's just a limitation of the RV industry as a whole, and they're just stuck, if it's not broken, don't fix it kind of mentality. But I really would like to see more accurate tank levels there. And so that would be definitely a welcomed upgrade. And same thing goes on the propane sensors. Like I mentioned before, these at least are better than 1/3. They show 1/8 increments, but I still would like to see these really in 1% increments. So that's something I think they're going to have to get with on Mopica or AP products if it's licensed to BMPro, the sensors there for the propane, but really would like to see those in the 1% increments as well. All right, another dislike I'll talk about is going to be on the Energy Center, the power page, and that is the battery and fuel section here. So it shows your battery voltage, 13.0 volts, and that is it. It doesn't show you anything else concerning your battery. Now, like I mentioned before, I'm a big fan of the Victron BMV712 battery monitor, and it uses an actual shunt that goes on your negative terminal, and then it monitors all the different things going through your battery. And I noticed that BMPro, I mentioned earlier, they're based out of Australia, and so they actually have a similar battery monitor that they produce where it has a shunt that goes between your negative terminal there. And so I just wonder if they could incorporate that into this system and have more information on your battery. So instead of just seeing a voltage, you're seeing more information like you do on the Victron battery monitor. So you're seeing, time to empty. You're seeing how much wattage or amps are going through that battery at any one given time. I think that would be the perfect opportunity to put all the information here in all this blank space. I did reach out to BMPro to ask them if their battery monitor would incorporate or sync into here in any method, and of course they said no, it's not quite compatible with the JayCommand system yet. So really would like to see that developed out there in the future. And for those not familiar with the Victron battery monitor, I'll just pull up on my phone what you actually get to see in the app. So you can see you have, of course, your state of charge at the top, but then it shows you your current in amps and watts, and then how much is consumed, how much time you have remaining. Of course, I'm plugged into shore power, so it's going to be infinite, but you just have a lot more valuable information here if you're boondocking or you're not plugged into shore power and you want to know what's going on, how much power is being consumed. This gives you a lot more information. And then of course you have other things like a history and trends with a graph and so forth. So it'd be really neat to see all this right here on the BMPro system. And last one I'll mention, it's not really a dislike, it's more just a con, a weakness of the BMPro system, the JayCommand system. and that is that it is Android based. And so this is an Android tablet, like I mentioned before. And so the weakness of that is, other systems and other RVs, they are dedicated, built from the ground up with an operating system that's very basic and simplistic that only runs the coach's app. Whereas this one here, it's just an Android tablet. There's nothing fancy about the Android tablet. It really hasn't been modified or tweaked to serve just the BMPro app. It's really just a basic, inexpensive Android tablet running the BMPro app. And so the weakness is, like I mentioned before, other things are running in the background, could potentially interfere with the BMPro app, or just things that run on Android or as Android gets updated that happen in the background that the BMPro team and the app had not accounted for or expected. And so there may be times from time to time where the app crashes. I've noticed when I haven't used my coach in a while and it's sitting in storage, like I mentioned, I connect through the cloud oftentimes, but once in a while I'll be on my phone trying to connect to the cloud and it just won't connect. And then I'll come out to the RV and discover that the app crashed. And so who knows, maybe an Android update was installed and it rebooted. Maybe there was some other kind of notification from another app that popped up and it caused the BMPro app to crash, and then that broke that cloud connection. So that's just an example of where that Android system can be a weakness compared to other systems and other coaches where it's, a dedicated operating system and the only thing running on it is the particular command center, the control center. But like I mentioned before in my tips, if you just go through the settings and disable the apps that you won't be needing, and that way you've got fewer things that are going to be running on the tablet in the background, I think that definitely helps. Along with when you sync up your Google account, just make sure you're not syncing everything onto this tablet here, because it's not going to be your phone where you need all that data there. Well, how about we end on a positive note, and I'll share my last like, which is these dedicated buttons below the tablet. And I think this is absolute genius for people that don't want to mess with the touchscreen. Oftentimes, like I said before, when I'm doing my slides, I come over here and I really prefer using the little analog LCD display and then these dedicated buttons to retract and extend. It's just a lot more satisfying to push and feel a click with a button, a physical button, compared to the touchscreen for motors and things like that. So I think it's absolute genius that BMPro did this. I've yet to see another control panel, a smart system, especially in a fifth wheel, where with such few buttons you can do so many different functions. So great job BMPro on that. So that's my in-depth review on the BMPro system. Now, like I said earlier in the video, this is the first of 5 RVs that I've owned that has this integrated, kind of a smart system to control everything. But I have seen a lot of other systems in videos and in person while touring RVs, and I must say, I think, this is just my opinion, but I think the BMPro system is arguably one of the best offerings in the marketplace. Now, I'm not affiliated with Jayco or BMPro, but I'd like to make this video helpful to them for future development and product updates. So do me a favor and let me know what you think about the BMPro system in the comments below. If you're an existing user of the BMPro system, let me know your likes and dislikes. And if you're watching this and you own a different brand RV with a different control system, I'd love to hear your comments below on how you think your system compares with this BMPro system. I think it'd be really helpful for the manufacturers, both for Jayco, BMPro, and other vendors even, to be able to read through those comments to improve their products. Well, as always, thanks for watching, and thanks especially for your helpful feedback and comments below.